Okay, so we make a lot of effects using particles in Maya. So it ranges from like ray guns and lasers and energy powers and smoke and water. So whatever whatever includes tiny particles. So what are them? Let me start with a very basic introduction to Maya particles. So I talk about Maya particles in this week, and then I will talk about Houdini particle system next week. So we have a good understanding of both. So you can use, so you will keep using it for many projects. Okay, so I start with nParticle tool. So what first of all, so I'm gonna change the color of the background. How do you turn it in black? So you know that if you press Alt and B on keyboard, you can change the color of the background. So all the particles that we are going to talk about are nParticles. That N in the beginning stands for a nucleus system, nucleus engine. So which is an engine is basically a bunch of codes within Maya that calculates the simulation, the dynamic simulation. So whatever here that comes with n particle, n cloth, n hair, n constraint, n cache, they all follow the same logic, the same engine. So it means that they interact with each other. So I just go to the nParticles and I grab the nParticle tool. So what is nParticle tool? It just creates the particle, but with one click I start creating like a bunch of particles. But not all the time you just want to like create like loads of particles just by clicking and clicking. I just want to make this one as outliner. Okay. So I delete them. If you double click on particle tool, nParticle tool, the tool settings will help you to have like multiple variety of creation. The one that we use quite often, so let's say you have a character and the character, you just want to paint lots of particles around the characters. So like the character has lots of halo effect around it. So just let me bring a asset. Let's grab one of these. Like let's say this person. Okay, now just imagine that you want to have like particles around his face, lots of particles. So first thing first is we select the character, the person, the model. It can be an animated model, and you click on this little icon over there. It says make it live. So basically it becomes magnetic, and the particles that you create will be added on top of that. Then you see that when I click, those particles are created on the surface of the person. So they are added on the surface. But what I can do, instead of just clicking, I can go say sketch particles, and I can say that like create like with each drag you create like let's say 30 particles, and I add a bit of radius as well, and then if I drag you will see that I add a lot of particles around. So that's a lot of like radius. I just want to delete these two. So you see that I keep deleting the nucleus engine as well. I don't want to have that for now. Okay, so now it's better. So let's say you want to have particles around here, around his head, and then here. and then here. So you got loads of particles here and there, surrounding the head of the person. So these are the particles. So first, you see that they just fall. If I play, so if I press Alt and B, I just want to have a black background. So if I play, they just fall. But why they fall? Because the engine, the nucleus engine that I said, all these N at the beginning, N particle, N cloth, N hair, they stand for nucleus engine. This nucleus engine has a gravity which is 9.8, so it means that they're supposed to fall. So if I say 0, nothing happens, they don't fall. Or if I say minus, let's say -3, they start to fly up. So I just go 0. So then I want to add a bunch of like different fields. So let's say I want them to wiggle. They will be turbulent. So here in the fields we have loads of fields. I just like separate this menu by clicking on top of that. In the fields we have air drag, which is air pressure, basically air resistance, gravity, Newton. So let's use turbulence. I click on turbulence but my particle was not selected. Then nothing happens if I play. How you connect a field to a particle that is already there? So you just select your particle, then select your field, and then go to the field and solver and click assign to selected. So it says it's already connected. So what I do, why it doesn't work? Because this turbulence should come right in the middle of that. And then when I play, they start to just like show a bit of motion. I just want to make the playback speed to play every frame but maximum real time. So you see that those particles are just like wiggling around his head. But after a while, they start to let's make a galaxy around his head. I just want to delete that, and I want to show you how you just add a new particle to the current nucleus engine. So what you can do, I just want to make a galaxy around his head. Again, I grab nParticle, I drag around his head, and then I turn off live, go to the up view. So if I drag, this time you see that they get generated next to the I should do that again. I just want to do that again. So it's live nParticle tool around his head. Just want to create a nice rotating galaxy around his head. Oh, something has spilled over there, which is fine. And then I go to the top view, so like some arms for the galaxy. Maybe more than 30, maybe 50. So now we have more. Oh, just spilled everywhere. So what I do, I just go to the top view. I turn the live off because I want to create like a nice galaxy shape. So I start like creating lots of particle here in the middle and some arms. And then some like extra like, let's say, particles all around. And then I press enter and then I move it up. Move that up, press 5 again. So now I just want to, you see that this particle, when I created that, the solver was nucleus. So it was following the same solver that we created. So there's no gravity, but there's no turbulence as well. So if you want to connect the turbulence to that, again, you have to select your field and then your particle and then assign to selected. And then play, you see that they start to have some turbulence. Now what I want them to start rotate. And so that's why instead of turbulence, I delete the turbulence. I select my particles and create a vortex. So this vortex gets created there. So I move it up right in the middle. And when you have a field, if you press T, the manipulators of that field shows up. So one of them is magnitude. If you just see from side, one of them is the maximum distance. So this field will apply in a maximum distance. It's -1. It means apply in everywhere the same. But if you just middle click and drag it, you can have this. You can have this distance like this field to operate just within this distance. And attenuation is like this field is strong in the middle, but just suddenly loses the energy when it gets to the edges. So if I play this, you will see that it rotates for a few frames, but then things start to splash away. I don't want that. So I want the so if you see the beginning, it's just nice, very nice. But then the particles carry a lot of energy. So what I do, I select the particles, and these particles has, if you just go to the channel box, you see this conserve. In the attribute editor is inside the dynamic properties, I believe. Yes, conserve. Dynamic properties, conserve. So it means that these particles, every one of them will conserve the whole energy all the time. They don't lose energy at all. So what I do, I just turn it into like 0.8. And I play it. You see that they start, it's just much slower, but at the same time, they don't fall apart. So what I do, I increase the vortex magnitude as well. So you see that we have a nice rotating thing all around his head. So, but the shape gets nicer like somewhere around here. So this is how I want to start. Maybe more, maybe more. I just go about 500 and I make the vortex even stronger. So when I play after, let's say, after 200, something around here. This is the time that I want the simulation to start with this shape. So again, in fields and solver, while you are at that specific frame, let's say 219, go to the initial state and say set for selected. You have to select your particles, initial state set for selected, go to the beginning, bang. So you see that the simulation starts from where it was. So what about the coloring of the particle? So first of all, you see that the lifespan is live forever. These particles live forever. You can change the color of the particle here in the color shading. So what I do, I change the color here to, let's say, blue, but that's not the blue that we want. So there is something that makes the particles look nice within the viewport, and that's color accumulation. When you turn on the color accumulation, you see that the particles that are on top of each other, they glow. So I just make the point size, let's keep it 2. And instead of points, I make it multi-points. So we have multiple points all around. And then radius more. And then here, what you can do, you can make it dark blue. You see that it's dark blue, but when they are accumulated on top of each other, they glow. What you can do, you can just click here and change the value to let's say 5, but then you have to move things around until you get to a point. Yeah, something like, I don't know. Yeah, something like that. I even may make the particle size a bit larger, instead of 2, maybe go to 3. No, 2 was fine. Now you can see that we have a galaxy around his head. Okay, what if you want to, so let me delete those particles. I'm gonna save this as the first. I just want to save it on the default. So it just gets saved on my document. So I just call that particle 1. I save as a new one, and in the new one I just want to emit particles from a person. So let's say your character wants to just punch something, and then suddenly a ray of particles starts getting emitted from that person. So I just want to delete all of that. So let's emit some particles from his eyes, let's say, or face. So let's say his eyes are supposed to emit some particles. So first of all, for emitting particles, you have these emitters in nParticles. So I created particles with nParticle tool, but this time I'm going to emit from an emitter. So which is just a point in the, so emitter is this, you see that? It's just a point in the space that emits particles. So if I play, you will see that it emits loads of particles and they just fall. So how many particles it emits? The emitter has a rate. It emits 100 particles per second. So maybe I go say 2,000 particles per second. So you see that 2,000 particles gets emitted, and they pass through the body of the character. But you can select your character and go to the encloth. Why it's under encloth, I don't know, but because they just follow the same nucleus engine, maybe that's the reason. So, but the collider, you want to say that this is going to be a passive collider. You turn that object into passive collider, then the particles start to hit the surface and just like a shower or something. But this emitter is an omni emitter. It means that it is emitting in every direction. Why they're falling? Because the engine nucleus, as I said, has gravity, which is 9.8. So if the gravity goes 0, you have the emitter just like pretty much emitting in all directions. And what is the speed of emission? There is a speed of emission here when you select your emitter. So it emits with this speed. Its speed is 1. You can say that 10, let's say 10 times faster. So you see that it emits like a lot of particle everywhere. So that's an omnidirectional emission. But you can say directional. So then when you play, it emits just a ray of particles in one direction. So, and what is that direction? The direction is what is here. It's X, Y, Z. It says direction X. So it emits into direction X. So let's say if the emitter would be here and you wanna, so I position the emitter in front of the character's eye, like right in the middle of his eyes. So, and then the emission will be not X but Z. So I turn off the X and the Z will be 1. But then we have the emission like that. Like it's just like the character is like pointing laser into something. But you can spread it. So the speed is 10, the spread is 0. So the more spread it gets, like everywhere. It gets spread everywhere. Because it has a collision with the body, I have to bring it out of the body. So now you clearly see. So you see, this is like spraying because the speed is too much. So that's why the spread, you see, is not. Yeah, the spreading is more visible now. What if you just wanna? So let's say this character. So that was just emission from an emitter. So what if this character? I just wanna make sure that this character has, yeah, that has nothing. So let's say he is looking high up. I'm going to select his head. Maybe I just deselect here. And I hold Control and Shift and drag down. So to turn on the soft selection tool, and then hold B and just increase the soft selection area. And then just want to rotate his head up. So just imagine that the character is rigged, so you can rotate his head up easily. So, but I now just use like modeling things. Maybe the center of the rotation would be here around. Okay. So this character is looking up, and his, let's say, his soul is flying out of his face. So what I do, if I just say that, okay, I want the particle emit from his face. If you select his face, I just hold Control Shift and drag down just to turn off the soft selection tool. So let's say you select these faces and you go to nParticles, and instead of emitter, say emit from object. But what would happen is that the particles will emit from every vertex in his body. If I play, you will see that every vertex in his body starts to emit particles. What you can do is instead of that, if you want this area to be emitter, you just like shift right click and duplicate the faces of that area with a bit of offset. And then shift right click and extract those faces so they become a new object. I have to extract it one more time. Double click on them. You see that it's a new layer, so I extract them, extract faces, so then they become a new object. Oh, okay, so I duplicate the face. You see that it's a new. I just delete the history. Alt Shift D to delete the history of that one as well. So I modify center pivot as well. So I have that surface inside his face to emit particles. But the point is that surface, so I'm gonna hide it. You can Control hide it, Control H hide it. I just wanna bring it. I don't unhide it first. Control 1 to make it isolated, and then I go to the nParticles emit from object. You see that it emits from that. I just have to bring the particles into the isolation as well. Right click here, add selector. So every individual point in this geometry, in this piece of object, turns into an emitter. But that's not what I want. So it's because the emitter that is added here under the object, let's say this is proxy face, and that's the body. This emitter here, if I press Control A, this is Omni. Instead of Omni, I say surface. And then I play, and you will see that the surface is like responsible. It's like the person is sweating now. And if I like select the nucleus engine and say the gravity is minus 9.8, those particles travel up. Now it's time to bring Control 1 to bring my main geometry back. Select that. So that piece can be the child of this geometry. So wherever you take this, it takes the proxy face that emits particle with it. So what I do, I just hide that one. And now I have particles emitting from the face. So these particles, if I select them, you can see that inside particle shape. So if I play them, instead of points, you can say streaks. So they turn into these like points with a tail. So that tail can be longer as well. And it's nice to turn on the color accumulation as well. But instead of streaks, and you can have multi-streaks as well. So loads of them with a bit of radius. And yeah. And some randomness. I need some randomness as well. So I just want the tail that fades, and also a bit of transparency, opacity, that one. So, and as you see, I can add colors. So when they accumulate on top of each other, they glow, and that's because of color accumulation. They glow. Maybe more particles. How we can add more particles in the emitter emits 100 particles. So what about 1,000? Go back and just we see thousands of particles emit. And they just like travel high up. I want them to emit to the direction of the face. If I press 4, you can see that they are emitting like all high up. But if I select the yeah, so you see that the emitter has this normal speed. So what is normal? A face normal, if you shift right click in the polygon display, you have this toggle face normal. A face normal is the direction that the face is looking towards. So it's a line that is just like shows the direction of each face. I just turn it off, shift right click, polycount, normal face. So this normal speed says that particles will emit towards, you see that now low 0, they just emit just high up. But if I just higher it up, they start emitting like with a speed that is towards the direction of the face. So it's like it's much more dynamic now. Now I'm gonna add some like turbulence in the middle or vortex or whatever you want. So I'm gonna add some field turbulence, but turbulence does nothing because it's just because the position of the turbulence matters. So I move it up in the middle of the face, like maybe here, and it's very weak as well. So if I just like make the magnitude stronger, so maybe like let's say 50, you will see that there is a turbulence like happening here as well. Maybe if I press T, you will see that it has an attenuation. So the turbulence field gets very weak soon. But I lower down this attenuation, so the strength of the turbulence stays on for a long time. So you see that it just like we can see a lot more turbulence. Oh, that's a lot. Maybe a middle click, lower it down, and lower down magnitude. This is more dynamic and nicer. And what else? What else you can do? You can like rotate them. They can just like, first of all, you see that they live forever. But you can say they die after like in lifespan, they die after like constant, like after 2 seconds. So what would happen? They rise up and then they die after 2 seconds. But you can have a more random range. So like after 4 seconds with a bit of lifespan randomness of 3. So it's basically between 1 and 7. So which is nicer. Then you can have a new tone. So let's say I add a new solver, a new field, force field. It's Newton. It's basically something like a black hole that absorbs particles towards. So if I play, you will see that the particles will go towards that one. But let me bring it down. So here you can. Are they connected? So make sure that they are connected. Assign selected. Yeah, they are connected. I bring it in here and make the magnitude high. Let's say 20. And then I play it. You see that it just like the particles gets absorbed to that point. Maybe 100. Yeah, so you see that they started to get absorbed. 200 to that area. So it's just like it just eats them towards itself. So what if it will be here? So the particles should go and then travel towards it. So you see that the particles are leaning toward it. So the reason that it has an attenuation, so what I do, I add an attenuation and then I add a maximum distance. So whatever just comes to this distance gets trapped with less attenuation and like much stronger force, like 500. So wow, so see that it just takes them, absorbs them. So it seems like the ghost is getting absorbed to that part. Let them die sooner. What you have a nice tool here in FX, and that's the interactive playback. So if you play and just move that where you want, you can see the interaction. Yeah, maybe this is a nice position. But I like the particles to die sooner. So the particles last a lot. So maybe die here. So the lifespan of the particles, I go and make that to 3 instead of 4. So they just go towards and then die here. Okay, so any force can have, so you see that I control the force using like these, I press T and show manipulators and control that. Any force has a volume control attribute as well, which is like they basically start to function within that volume. So I can turn that into a sphere. So you see that and a sphere is added around it, but that's a very tiny sphere. Just make it larger and larger and larger. So now you will see that the particles don't do anything until this sphere comes and gets on their way. So it's a volume for that the field happens within that volume or outside that volume if you turn on the volume exclusion. So the field doesn't work inside, but it works outside the volume. Okay, so let's turn off the volume control and keep it as it was. So that was like a quick overview of the particles and the fields and everything. Let's move on to the next topic. Oh, I just want to add some important topic, which is a very important field is drag. So you see that these particles are flying freely, but all the time, most of the time, particles in the air they have a bit of resistance with because of the particles, air particles, air molecules. So they create a resistance, and we call that drag. So if you add a drag to your particles, you see that they become slower. So if I bring the drag field up and make it like strong, like the magnitude is just very low now, I'll just make it 5. So you see that they just become maybe, I don't know, the magnitude, I make it 50. So you see that they slow down very quickly, especially when they get close to that drag field. I can make that attenuation to like 0. So this drag field applies everywhere on all particles. Oh, that's a lot. So then 50 is too much. I go back to 1. So the particles, so there's a drag field applying everywhere. Maybe not 0. Just go back, maybe half. Two. Yeah. You see that like the behavior becomes much more nicer. But then if you want to speed it up, you just have to make the speed in the emitter. So there's air resistance, but the speed, we increase the speed in emitter. You can add wind as another field. You have a uniform force that applies on all particles at the same time, and stuff like that. Yeah, so let's see what else. Okay, how to render this? I didn't like that. I just delete the drag, and I'm gonna undo to where we had before the drag field added, and I'm gonna show you how to render what we have. So let's say this is the effect that you're happy with. How to render that? One of the easiest way of rendering is to use a so if you go to render setting, instead of Arnold, you use Maya Hardware 2.0. So this is gonna render that. So basically, Maya Hardware is what you see in the viewport is what you get. So I just make the resolution higher, and so if you render that, this is what you get. But what you can do, we usually don't render the character with the particles, so I hide the character. So I just want to lower down the resolution so it doesn't. Let's go and make another render. So this is what we get in the Maya Hardware, but you have the chance of some enhancement, like in the Maya Hardware 2.0 setting. You have this motion blur. You can turn it on and like add a bit of motion blur, like 32 sampling, and then render it. It has some like kind of a bit of and some anti-aliasing, so smooth the edges with like 16 sampling. So you see that without, which is like, and with, which is a bit smoother, which is nice. So now you just go here and say, this is like particles, and you don't want a single frame, you just want to render a whole sequence. So let's say you want to render like 200 frames, and that's the name. This is your project position. You see that if you want to change it, you have to set your project in a new place, new location in your hard drive, the camera and everything. So if I go to the render batch render, and then if I open the here, you can see that it says the rendering starts. So it thinks a bit at the beginning, but then the whole process of rendering happens very quickly, as quick as a play blast, as quick as a playback. You see that started rendering. Frame 100. Done. So all 200 frames are rendered now in few seconds. So then you can render. So I hide this. Then I bring my character back, and then I render my character with a proper, let's say, I add a sky dome, which is invisible. The camera is 0, and I render the character using a sky dome, using Arnold, and yeah. So this is your character. So I save that. Imagine that you rendered the whole frames all together. So I call this character as a Maya IFF or OpenEXR character. So when you take that into After Effects or Nuke, so if I go to that Maya projects, default, and images, I have a character which is one single frame, and then I have this particles, which is a footage that it says IFF sequence. Yes, we import it. In Maya, if you see, my frame rate is 24 frames per second here. Just make sure that your sequence here, when it gets imported, go to the interpret footage main and just change the frame rate to 24, because After Effects import it at 30 frames per second by default. I make a new composition, and then this is below that. You see that the particles are added on top of that. But here you have to make sure that you multiply the particle or screen. Yes, screen the particles. So, but you always have the chance of adding more glow here. So some more glow here in After Effects on your render, or glint or star glow or whatever you want. So that's how you render it with hardware render. I'm going to talk about a new form of particles now. And that's, so if I create, so let's create a I go and create an emitter. nParticles and emitter. So this is an emitter, and the particles are just like, oops, the particles are just falling down. I just play back speed, play every frame. Yep. Make it closer to the floor so you see it nice. So the particles just fall down and pass through the floor. But when you select the nucleus, you have that use plane option as well. You tick it off, and then the particles just stick on the floor. The floor can have a bit of, the ground plane can have a bit of bounciness. The bounciness is 0 at the moment, so they stick to that. So if I add some bounciness, they start to bounce a bit. So what if I would have a bowl, and I want to fill it, and I want all these particles to be like little balls. So I make a sphere and I bring it up, make it larger. So just want to turn this into I go to the side and select half of the faces and delete them. Just to avoid that blackness inside, I just say lighting, two-sided light. So now you know that you have to go to nCloth and say create passive collider. So these particles will collide with that and gets accumulated inside that. I select these particles, and instead of go to the attribute editor and inside nParticle shape, instead of points I say blobby surface. So you can, or you can do that like this. Instead of, I just want to delete all these particles and everything. Yeah. So everything is deleted. When you want to create your particle, so instead of clicking on the emitter, first go to the options, create options, and go instead of points, say I want to create some balls. And then after that, create the emitter. And then you will see that you will have all these stuff. So loads of balls with different colors are getting created, tiny balls. And if I make that as a N-cloth create collider, you will see that they just fall into that. Let's make the floor. So I select the nucleus engine and I say that we have a plane on the floor as well. You will see that we have, so these balls, they have a bit of dynamism as well. So you see that they're bouncy. So you know about this interactive playback as well. So when you interactive play, you can move this around. You can even pour it like that, or here. Okay, maybe we need like 1,000 frames. So interactive playback. How to change the colors the way we want? So just want to and bring it back on the floor. So these balls, the color of them is controlled by the shading with a ramp. You see that the color is a linear ramp, and this ramp is applied on the randomized ID. What I do, I just say that instead of linear ramp, just none. Then you have like this ramp, and you can add lots of different. Again, this is gonna be none. This is gonna be none. 3. And this one will be, I don't know, blue. Maybe green. Now we have loads of like colorful balls falling down. So if you're happy with your simulation, one last thing you have to do is to cache your simulation before rendering. So you see that if I play this and if I scrub through the timeline, the simulation is just like gets chubby and it just doesn't work because it just simulates on the fly. But what I can do, I can say that select my particles, go to the N cache, create new cache, N objects, select the range that I want. You see that the particles are supposed to get cached in the project directory, and I want to just cache like 200 frames. So if I create, you see that it caches up to frame 200. So basically, if I set my frame rate to 200, basically it creates some files on the hard drive. If you look at the project directory, you will see that inside the cache folder you have this N cache and you have this all. So you have one file for each frame. So that's why you can, like, after that, safely scrub through your simulation. That's when you are happy with your simulation, and then get it rendered. Yeah, that was all.